Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking community pharmacy teams for their extraordinary work from the front line throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We at Pharmacy Business are incredibly proud of you for stepping up day after day amid some of the most difficult challenges the nation has ever faced. During the pandemic, the entire profession has earned a long-awaited recognition from both the government and members of the public as a reliable, informed, and credible asset and an integral part of the NHS family. Our pharmacy heroes have shown how their invaluable skills can be adapted, expanded, and utilized to alleviate pressures off the GPs and hospitals, as well as to work collaboratively with other healthcare settings in a health emergency. As the NHS evolves and further integrations take place within the primary care network, community pharmacy will have to establish itself as a vital cog in the nation's healthcare wheel by picking up diseases early, by better managing chronic illnesses, and by making new service offers. Our session tonight will look at some of the drivers and enablers that could help you along the way. For instance, COVID-19 has accelerated digital and technological innovations, such as those via remote video links and telephonic consultations. Could adaptations like these be used to transform community pharmacy practice to create a future that's both sustainable and profitable? While on Tuesday you heard what you need to change and why, tonight we will look at how you can make those changes happen. Before we start tonight's proceedings, I'd like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our sponsors, AAH, Bristol Labs, Glenmark, Pharmacy Complete, and Sigma Pharmaceuticals for supporting us at such a difficult time and helping us hold this very important conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Preet, for that welcome, and thank you all for attending this, the second of our conference events. I'd also like to thank our speakers, our panelists, and our sponsors, who, together with the team at Pharmacy Business, have helped us make this conference happen. If you're on Twitter, please be active during the conference and use the hashtag PBConf20 shown at the bottom of your screen. Apologies for that technical issue. Please do use the questions box throughout the event and download the conference brochure, which you'll find in the handout box on your screen. During our first session on Tuesday, we heard about the changing expectations of the NHS and the challenges for PSNC in negotiating our national contract. We heard from Simon Dukes on the demands that PSNC have put on the table and the frustrations with the lack of recognition of the impact that the pandemic and an underfunded contract is having on community pharmacy. Our three independent contractor panelists debated some excellent audience questions, and they identified a need to positively differentiate ourselves from other providers and the need to wrap up the supply of medicines and service together. That adds value to patient experience and to outcomes. Our panelists also highlighted the need to upskill ourselves and our teams, embrace technology, and stop the race to the bottom with free and undervalued provision of services or product. We also discussed some elements of the right review, with recognition that we need to resolve the balance of funding to give PS&C the resources it needs to do its job whilst maintaining the required level of support at a local level. Local is the new national is a phrase that kept coming up. That linked to the urgent need to engage effectively with primary care networks. We vigorously debated unity and one voice across the sector to make local and national representation possible, and the requirement for a common communication strategy to government and other healthcare providers and to the public. When we ran a poll on levels of confidence in the future of community pharmacy at the beginning of and the end of Tuesday's session, we saw a small but significant upward shift in the curve, and I anticipate that we'll see an even bigger shift this evening. Rina Barai, one of the panelists, contacted me shortly after the presentations finished and said that the confidence curve was very similar to the innovation curve, and that some resistance to change stems from the level of confidence in our future, but also a lack of vision or will in some to change. I'd now like to launch our first poll of the evening. This will appear on your screen shortly, and we'll give you around 30 seconds to answer before closing and reviewing. Please indicate how confident you currently feel about the future of your community pharmacy. Okay, can we close the poll now and then display the outcomes? Okay, really interesting, and a higher level of confidence, I would say, from that which we had on Tuesday. We'll capture that and we'll compare that to the same poll question at the end of the evening. Thank you for that. As Pri said in his welcome, Tuesday's session was about why change needs to happen on many levels. Tonight is more focused on how you can enable the required change. Here's the running order for this evening. I have set our speakers the challenge of presenting on their topic in 10 minutes. No mean feat, but I'm sure they're up to it. First up is Sanjay Gambhir from the innovative Greenlight Pharmacy Group on how to operationalize services. Sanjay will share with their learns from this year's flu vaccination service. Then Sunil Kochhar, an independent prescriber and consultant pharmacist from Regent Pharmacy in Kent. He will explain how he utilizes technology to improve outcomes for patients and for his pharmacy. We'll then explore how to identify efficiencies and improve productivity with Andy Chilton from Valresco. Valresco have already helped many pharmacies create that critical gift of time. And finally, we'll hear from Deborah Evans on how to best utilize that time by creating a business plan for a sustainable future. Each short presentation will have a brief opportunity for you to post some clarification questions to each speaker. Then we will conclude the evening with an opportunity to hear from our pharmacy leaders panel and for you to post questions to them about the future of the sector. But I'd first like to introduce our first speaker, Please welcome Mr. Ramachandran, Chairman and Managing Director of Bristol.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you are all safe and sound. Bristol Laboratories are delighted to be sponsoring Pharmacy Business Conference once again this year. I'm pleased to introduce the first speaker of this evening. Let's welcome Mr. Sanjay Gambhir, Superintendent Pharmacist from Greenlight Pharmacy. Mr. Sanjay will be talking to us about planning and delivering services in a COVID-19 landscape and beyond. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. So yes, I'm going to chat about what we learned from doing vaccinations in this crazy COVID world we find ourselves in. So, how on earth did pharmacy even pull this off? How did the community pharmacy sector safely vaccinate millions during COVID? Because, and let's congratulate ourselves here, community pharmacy really did pull this off. The planning involved in delivering a flu service during COVID was crazy. And planning this in the middle of the biggest health crisis in a century was crazy. And having only just figured out how to dispense and see OTC patients safely, we were then asked by the NHS to figure out how to safely vaccinate in consulting rooms during COVID. And that seemed, at least to me, mind-blowingly complicated. But what community pharmacy does so well, and I maintain we do this better than any other part of the NHS, is problem solve on our feet in real time. So what did we do at Greenlight? Well, for me, figuring out how to do proper COVID infection control was daunting. And yes, there's PPE and hand washing and social distancing and so on. But for me, the penny dropped when I realized infection control in a COVID world fundamentally meant managing and controlling how patients moved around the pharmacy and how we interacted with the patients. And even when patients could enter the pharmacy. And this is weird because it's so different from how community pharmacy normally interacts with patients. I mean, we pride ourselves on being the most accessible part of the NHS. And we had to minimize the time the patient is in the pharmacy. I mean, how weird is this? Actually actively minimizing the time our customers are in the pharmacy. But it turned out this wasn't as crazy as it felt like at first, because we just interacted with the patients in a different way. We just did it digitally. We still interacted with the patients. It just meant we weren't doing it all in the pharmacy. And it turned out this was way, way more efficient. The risk assessment forms, which was once completed face-to-face with the patient, we just did them online. We created a simple Google document, which included the COVID risk assessment and the flu risk assessment. We sent a link to the patient for them to complete in advance of them coming into the pharmacy. And the really cool bit of that was it meant the patient did the work. And wow, it saved a mountain of time. I can't believe we hadn't actually thought of doing this before. And we got a load of data in a lovely spreadsheet, which made the claims easier. And it gave us massively rich data about the people who were using our service. And some pharmacy IT systems, such as Pharma Outcomes, did provide a similar tool, and it's really good. But they weren't available when I was planning. And anyway, I like the fact that Google Forms allowed me to tailor the questions to exactly what I wanted. And this way of doing things was a massive revelation to me. So this year, we recruited a massive number of patients digitally. And this year, for the first time, we used an app called Patient Access. I think I'm probably contractually obliged to say something really weird like other apps are available. But I have got to say, I really like Patient Access. It's got 11.2 million registered users in the UK, which is by far the most downloaded health app in the UK. So its reach to the public is massive. And the impact for us was incredible. It allowed us to attract significant numbers of new patients, way beyond our normal network of patients. And it allowed us to manage the bookings of these patients through its booking and calendar function. So we learned a huge amount and will not be going back to doing things like before. The way patients interact with bricks and mortar and online has changed more than we could have ever imagined because of COVID. and it will never go back to what it was before. And we, the independent community pharmacy sector, we need to embrace this. So my road to Damascus moment number 1 was utilizing digital platforms to recruit patients, and especially new patients. My road to Damascus moment part 2 was utilizing digital platforms to allow patients to interact with the pharmacy in a way that actually does not involve any pharmacy staff time, and understanding that this is okay. And weirdly, to me, it turned out this was very acceptable to patients. We learned to use the face-to-face time we have with patients to concentrate on the unique stuff that we do. And guess what? That is not filling in forms. And patients really appreciated this increased quality time. I realized there are some super simple to use bits of IT out there, which can look super slick, such as Google Forms. And I realized there are some super slick high-tech apps out there that some really clever people have developed that allows pharmacy to interact with patients in a super slick way. As I say, I love patient access, but other apps are available. So for me, there's no going back. I always worried about how we, a small group of bricks and mortar pharmacies, could possibly develop a slick IT face, which was able to take on the millions of pounds big companies invest in IT. But now I see a path that shows how bricks and mortar can take on and beat the internet pharmacies and the PLCs by entering the virtual space and mixing it up with our real world space. And a service-led model utilizing very available IT is very much where the independent pharmacy sector can thrive. And as crazy as it sounds, this crazy COVID world we're in is what made me realize that. Thank you.
Sanjay, thank you very much for that. Both informative, inspiring, and entertaining, if not crazy. I just want to pick up. We've got a couple of questions that have come through, more specifically around the patient experience. And you said they'd like it, but have you done actually a bit of evaluation on that?
Only as the patients come in, we kind of, particularly at the start, we were really curious. This was weird for us. So just asking the patients how they found that experience. And I think sometimes as clinicians, we've got a bit of a God complex. And actually, the reality is patients are used to, particularly during lockdown, they've got used to interacting, shopping is the wrong word, doing stuff online. So it wasn't particularly unusual. And the point was they got more time to talk about clinical stuff with us. They didn't want to fill in forms with us. They hate that. And that was kind of one of the revelations. Shovel out all the boring stuff. Spend more time doing the things we're good at.
Great. And one more question that's come in was about how you feel. Perhaps it's a bit early to do the science, but from an art point of view, how do you think that impacted on the numbers that you were able to engage with and therefore deliver vaccinations to?
Oh, more. Yeah. I mean, look, this year flu for everybody. Everybody's done a lot more flu. But what was very interesting for me is we attracted a whole cohorts of patients, new patients, from quite distant from where our pharmacies were, people we'd never seen before. I mean, we're always quite good at getting, our existing cohorts of patients. But this was a whole new bunch of patients. That was really interesting.
And when you say new, that was new to you, obviously, but also, was it new to having a vaccination full stop in some cases?
Oh, some absolutely. So it was kind of both, attracting new patients who would normally have a flu jab, But then also, like I say, a whole bunch of people that hadn't had a flu jab before. And again, that was really intriguing.
Really grateful for that. Got Jignesh has just posted a comment, yeah, that he did exactly the same and had the same outcome. So it just shows you're not a one-off in that respect. Well, you are really, but not on that. And one question from Jignesh was, any idea how we can do this across a PCN level with local pharmacists to make sure that everybody's getting on board? But I think it might be a bit late for that this year, but I think that's a conversation between pharmacy and PCNs. We've got these PCN leads, haven't we, which we've talked about certainly on Tuesday. Thank you, Sanjay. Really grateful for your input and your insights into that, and all your responses to the questions as well. So it's now my pleasure to ask Rajiv Shah, the Executive Director of Sigma, to introduce our next speaker.
Hi everyone, hope you're well and keeping safe during these strange times. Thank you to the AMG family for putting on another conference, albeit in a different format this year. We're very proud at Sigma to be sponsoring the conference once again. So on to our next speaker, and I'm very happy to introduce Sunil Kochhar, owner and consultant pharmacist at Regent Pharmacy in Kent. And Sunil will be talking to you today about how to utilize and leverage technology to improve outcomes for your patients and your pharmacy. Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, Rajiv, for that kind introduction, and good evening, everyone. Mike has given me a challenge of a 40-minute presentation in 10 minutes. So if there are quite a few questions in your chat, I'm quite happy, Mike, to answer them afterwards individually. I have clicked, but it's not moving. Is it moving on your end? There we go. So my aim today is really to showcase how I've embedded virtual consultations into my practice. Now, remote consultations isn't new for community pharmacy. On a daily basis, we speak to people and give advice on the telephone. However, this is just taking it a step further. It's creating a commercial work stream for us. Now, we all live in an online community now. Social media platforms are on every device. And as you can see with this webinar, we're now in the Zoom age. So for community pharmacy, there's no escaping from this. I've embraced it in my pharmacy and put it in practice. What I'm encouraging is everyone to embrace this and grow your pharmacy. Okay, it doesn't seem to be moving on my end. Mike, do you mind taking control? So apologies for that. For some reason, the slide's not turning. But Mike, when I say next slide, if you can do that for me, that'd be great. So my journey really began pre-COVID. I did some training on remote consultations. And the aim for me in my practice was to embed this in 2021. However, we got into lockdown, COVID came in, and I had to start it straight away. The first journey I had was, as at that time in lockdown, the first lockdown, I was acting chair of Kent LPC. And together with the CEO, Shubhra Shah, we spoke about smoking cessation and our PGD services stopped. And we wanted to create this kind of help for the community, but using an IP network to do a PSD service to be able to prescribe virtually and then send the PSD to community pharmacy to do the supply. We turned this around in 10 days from concept to actual delivery. Now, Health Education England were quite impressed by this, and they've allocated 15,000 to Kent LPC to do this evaluation on this whole PSD service. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. What we did was we got an IP, an independent prescriber network, And through this and through the PSD service, we learned new skills. What I learned, a key thing, was the translator services. Now, with translator services and virtual consultation, you can literally engage with every community anywhere. Next slide, please. So virtual consultations, like I said, you need to learn new skills. So there are a lot of pharma companies that have produced training material. I would advise all of you to do a training material and get skilled up. Virtual consultations isn't something that you can just do while you're practicing in community pharmacy. You have to allocate time for this. And it's a good way to organize a virtual waiting room. So the softwares like Livy that allow you to have a virtual waiting room for virtual consultations. However, through our IP network, one of the prescribing pharmacists, Attica, introduced me to a software called Jelly Software. And that has virtual consultations embedded, but it allows me to capture data and to also do patient safety netting. The key thing with virtual consultations that I've learned over time is to make efficiencies. And the best way to do this is to create pre-consultation forms and to get virtual consents and signatures before your consultation. This just shortens your time and makes it, productive to just carry out the whole consultation. And you give more time to the person that you're talking to. Now, last week I had to do remote consultations at home, and I had internet anxiety because my internet is really bad at home. So you need to make sure you have backup measures, whether that's 4G, going back to telephone, or using FaceTime or something like that. But bear that in mind. It's not just your connection, it's also the other person on the other end that needs to be in the right internet connection. We've now embraced virtual consultations as part of our practice. So when we get people phoning in for emergency contraception or inquiring about Viagra over the counter, we do a virtual consultation, give them the pre-consultation form. So all they do when they walk in is collect the supply. Next slide, please. So like I said, we do this for over-the-counter products. So virtual consultations is not just for pharmacists. We have to get our team behind this. Using virtual consultation to do product explanations, what services you do, and if you have your team, trained up on behavioral support and be able to manage patients, this is a good way to clear up some of your workload. And for example, the EHC consultations and the Viagra consultations are mainly done by my pharmacy team. Now, with virtual consultations, the best way to learn is to learn from other industries. I have a friend who's a skin consultant, and what she does is a virtual consultation. The system she has set up is she will send a text to someone's WhatsApp. They click on it, pay by Apple Pay, and the next day they have their skincare delivery. We need to really, really fast forward and change our behaviors and how we work in pharmacy. Next slide, please. So, like I said, one of the independent prescribers in our PSD group introduced me to Jelly Software. It is crucial to have the right software, because just like your EPOS system, how crucial that is for retail growth, you need something to help you with your virtual consultation and to learn from it, to capture data. But the key thing is patient safety. It allows you to keep records, do your safety netting, be able virtually to refer to the GP, to be able to signpost virtually. What I've started now, and it's been a few weeks, is to network with other healthcare professionals, and we have a push system. What that is I'm working with a nutritionist and an osteopath now. So when they have patients and they need pharmacy care, they ping them over and push them into my Jelly Software system, so I can take over as a pharmacist and an independent prescriber because their practitioner believes they need pharmacy care. Next slide, please. So as an independent prescriber, virtual consultations have just transformed me. Having a prescribing platform, knowing that I'm doing my safety netting, doing my patient care, at the same time able to do remote consultations, remote prescribing, it's just been phenomenal. But it's just grown me. With regards to taking it a step further, we're sending out kits, blood test kits, to patients. They do their own pathology, the report comes to me, I give them the advice, and you can build your services from this. So we've had people who've needed B12 injections and vitamin D, and we've pushed this further. So during lockdown and COVID, I decided to form a community pharmacist prescriber academy because I believe we haven't been found a place yet. And through this academy, we're going to just work through some case studies and push out and showcase that community pharmacist prescribers are a new generation of synergistic patient care. So watch this space. We are going to play an integral role in healthcare and well-being. Next slide, please. My next steps, which me and my team are working on right now, is virtual outreach work. As a pharmacy, we've always done outreach work, but it's been in community halls or in local shopping centres. But what we're doing now is actually going to people's homes. We need to actually get out there and be virtually with them. We're going to be doing some social media live events and some Zoom webinars, and even through the Jelly software, it allows for secure support groups. So for example, like the smoking cessation, we can do smoking cessation groups and do behavioral support with them. The first one we will be trying as an awareness day is diabetes through our virtual systems. And from that, we're hoping to build our clinical services. Next slide, please. So bricks and mortar pharmacy, we have to get into the Zoom world. We cannot compete with large e-commerce systems and websites. We just can't. But what we can compete with is virtual consultations, because we are the face that the community trusts. And this is what we need to embrace and just get out there virtually into people's homes and look after them. Now, if you were to go on this journey, what I would suggest is do your virtual consultation skill training, try and build a service that links to a product. And a good thing would be something like weight management, and it will help with your PQS as well. One thing I really want community pharmacists to know and to appreciate is we have something that no other healthcare professional has. When someone walks in, we can take NHS and a private service and wrap it together as just one service. So we get the best of both worlds in both scopes. So community pharmacy out there, the Zoom rocket has launched. And if we don't take a seat and take a ride, we're just going to lose out. So my advice is to try and get on this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil. Inspiring, innovative, always pushing the boundaries and responding to change in such a positive way, and then articulating it so well. You're amazing. A few questions for you quickly. Firstly, some very positive strokes for you coming through on the question or comments as well. So thank you. One specific question around the remote consultation is, does it concern you that some of these consultations may be recorded?
Does it concern me? No, if it's not me doing it, it's down to the patient. It's their, at the end, it's their health and their history. So with regards to GDPR and using platforms like Jelly and Livy, avoid those. I can't stop someone filming it on their phone and posting it, but that would be from the patient's perspective rather than my perspective, because we're using platforms that are secure.
Okay, thank you for that. And one other question in terms of feedback from patients around their acceptability of remote, because there's been a lot of concerns both across primary care, actually, isn't there, about whether patients find that connectivity sufficient. And as you rightly point out, we've used telephones for a long time, and increasingly so with things like New Medicine Service and even the community pharmacist consultation service. We're doing a lot of that over the phone because of the pandemic. But feedback from patients?
So feedback from patients is they didn't realize community pharmacy could do this. They knew that GPs could do it, but they didn't realize community pharmacy could do it. And the feedback's been great. We have a system when we have seen someone in a virtual consultation, it pings them to do a review. And I've got a collection of reviews that say how amazing it is to be able to speak to the pharmacist virtually.
Okay, I haven't got any more specific questions for you there. So, but one thing is that I think you're going to get a lot of people asking you about PSD because a lot of interest there. So I don't know if you're happy to have your details back up again, or I mean, you're well known, you're on LinkedIn, aren't you? And people can get hold of you through as Dear Pharmacist very often, don't they?
Yeah, so I'm quite happy for people. LinkedIn is probably the best social media platform to get me on. I'm a PSNC Southeast rep, so you can get my details from the PSNC website. With regards to Kent LPC, I'm no longer a committee member because I've committed myself to other clinics and building the practice and doing things there. Time is deficient, but with Shilpa Shire, Kent LPC, they'll be doing the evaluation, and certainly as soon as it's launched, I'll be sharing it everywhere.
Great, brilliant. Thank you again, Sunil. Really grateful.
And thank you everyone for joining in this evening.
So it's now my pleasure to ask Martin Imms, the country manager at Glenmark, to introduce our next speaker.
Hello everybody, my name is Martin, the UK country manager for Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. Once again, Glenmark are really proud to be sponsoring the event this year. It's just a real shame that we can't be together face to face. Now, our next session, we'll be hearing from Andy Chilton, the director of Valresco Group. Andy will be talking about how to identify potential efficiencies and capacity to create additional revenue. Over to you, Andy.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Andy.
Hi, fantastic. Okay, I'm just trying to make things move. There we go. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about how we identify opportunities to improve efficiency within pharmacies very quickly and very accessibly for people. So whether it's a small pharmacy right the way through to large pharmacies, we've got lots of experience in this, and I want to sort of share a few thoughts with you tonight. So thank you very much for this. Without further ado then, there's a sort of common phrase that I hear quite a lot. There's some fantastic opportunities that we've been hearing about. There's really fantastic new services or examples of where people have developed amazing services, and we've just heard a brilliant example there with the Jelly software from Sunil, for example. But there's a really familiar phrase that I keep hearing, and it's, I'm so busy right now, how do I find the time to even think about services, let alone develop and deliver them? And by the way, this is not uncommon to other sectors as well, but in particular, pharmacy has been so busy, particularly with the COVID impact. And, this is a real problem, but it's an interesting irony as well, in that if you're really, really busy right now, it's only going to get busier. And what we're trying to help with is to overcome that super busyness at the minute, to try to free up time so that more time's available to work on the business as well as in it, and to work sort of smarter and not necessarily harder. And that's not to say that there aren't, as I say, fantastic examples out there, but there are many, many pharmacies who still have lots of opportunity to do much more, and they have a lot of latent capacity in there. The good news is there is a lot of latent capacity, and in fact, from the work that we've done over the past few years in pharmacy, we've found that on average there's a 50 hours a month available time for the pharmacist can be delegated. Now, you can only delegate that if there's time and space underneath. But what we've found is that there's an average of 67 hours per month through process efficiencies in the dispensary. And that means that you can now safely delegate those without affecting quality or service and free up an awful lot of time. And I would just say as well, this 50 hours is actually half what we've observed, and we've been very conservative in halving that so that we can allow for variations in how things get implemented. But there's an awful lot of capacity. If you think about it, there's probably close to 10 million hours plus within pharmacy to contribute to this transformation, if you like, in the positioning of pharmacy as was mentioned earlier, as a really special cog in the healthcare system. So how do we go about doing this? It's quite straightforward. If you imagine the pharmacy, the dispensary, as a nice sphere. So if we've got our little sphere here, and there's all sorts of things going on in there that make up that system, that operating way of working, those procedures, those processes. And all those things make the processes evolve in a certain way. And it's not just the internal impacts on the processes, it's the external demands and any external forces as well that work together to make these processes evolve. And through evolution, these processes become a mixture of valuable or value-adding activities and non-value-adding activities, or put it simply, waste. And there's an awful lot of what we see when we look at processes as opportunity to remove that waste, thus freeing up time and making it a lot easier to do the things that you want to do. So, you know, we need to free up that time to be able to not just do these new services, if you like, but to think strategically, to really look at your business and to think strategically, what should we be doing? And Deborah's going to be mentioning some of those things in the next session. So what we do and how we actually make this come about is we effectively take a really detailed look at your dispensary. We are unobtrusive, we don't disturb. So whilst we're on the edge of this little sphere here, we're looking in, we're listening, we're watching, we're feeling everything that's going on around this system so that we can spot opportunities, and not just spot them, but time things and quantify and prioritize how to go about those opportunities. And we do that over a period of about 3 days. So it's a rapid process, and we can, during that time, often free up opportunities for improvement or as we're there. We do a quick introductory half-day visit to make sure people are nice and comfortable and they understand why we're there. It's not just a panic time seeing somebody in the corner with a device monitoring everything that's going on. We disappear. After the people have gotten a bit comfortable, we disappear, but we come into the dispensary and we carry out a series of process-related studies. This is done second by second because we really want to find all the details and all the opportunities in as short a time as possible. And we've got a wonderful device that helps us to capture that very easily. But importantly, at the end of each of these days, we can instantly produce the results from those studies, and we can show the pharmacist and their team exactly what we've found that day. So nothing's hidden, and this is about engaging people. So it's not just about grabbing data and finding opportunities and writing a fancy report. This is about engaging the hearts and minds of the people in the dispensary in what the current situation is, getting them to that acceptance level quickly by allowing them to quickly interrogate that data as we go. And we spend a couple of days on process. We do a full day looking at the pharmacist to determine what they can develop safely, what's non-core to their role. And again, we can show that at the end of the day. We take the whole team through a big simulation exercise, which is all about creating the art of the possible, but more importantly, they make a fantastic change happen. And they do it in a sort of simulated way, but it's safe and it's very similar to the dispensary. So when they've been through that, the engagement and motivation is massive, and we then present and discuss what the opportunities are, and away we go. We're into implementation phase. So just a quick recap. We used to do it traditionally involving all sorts of manual capture on bits of paper and stopwatch pen and everything. And that used to take us a lot of time to do and was obviously therefore more expensive and inaccessible to smaller organizations. But what we've done now is we've eradicated all of the manual non-value added work that we were doing. So in effect, we've made ourselves lean just as we're talking about helping pharmacists to become lean at how they work. And we are not qualified to help you unless we're doing that to ourselves. So we've done that to ourselves, so it's easier to find better opportunities and more of them, and we can do that in half the time and therefore half the cost, which makes it much more accessible. So moving on from there, a couple of quick examples of how this might work. So here's before. Our pharmacist has 40% of time which is delegable. We made a few changes to the layout and process and things to create time in the dispensary, which allowed them to delegate 31% of that blue, and they filled 19% more of it with the green. So the green got more. The green is core work that a pharmacist should be doing, services, clinical stuff. But in this case, they actually had spare time, which allowed them to work on the business, not just in it, thinking about how they were going to transform and what new services they were going to start to develop next. So that was really powerful. And then lastly, a quick example, moving forward again, let me see. Yeah, so speeding up walking in dispensing, we made a few changes just to the policy of how walk-ins are handled and moved the average time to move the walk-in through from 7 minutes on average to about 3 minutes. And this is not so much about saving money in this particular case or capacity, but you don't want your walk-ins to come in and disappear, for example. So telling them come back later, assuming we go back to the walk-in thing. But this is about keeping them there so that you can have that conversation with them. You can develop that relationship, that loyalty. You can maybe provide a service whilst they're there. You can maybe sell them something from the retail area or as part of their treatment. And it's about creating space and time rather than having to scramble to get things through and indeed, dissatisfy the patient, the customer. So in short, this is about a really detailed but rapid study of your operation in every aspect so that we can find many opportunities, but prioritize them and then implement those so that you free up time quickly, which can then be used for more clinical service and the transformation itself. That's about me done, I think, Mike. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that very quick whip through the opportunities of however efficient we are and we strive to be. It's a time when we can find some of that latent time and then put it into use, which is the key element. Finding the time isn't easy, but when you then create that time, how do you then use it?
Exactly.
Which is a lovely segue across. But I'm just going to take a couple of questions that have come in while you're doing it. One point that George has made, George Wickham from down in Exeter, has very valid. Is there any point doing these studies at atypical times like these? Well, I know your studies are over a period of time. If you can indicate that.
Yes, there is, and it all this approach can be applied more than once. So it can be to free up time so that you can cope with chaos. A lot of our clients have said to us that thank God they did what they did with us just before COVID, because they've coped really well with it. They'd freed up the capacity in order to be able to cope with that, and they've reported that it's been calm or less than chaos, if you know what I mean. So yeah, there's never a good time. Now is good, I would absolutely say. And hi George, by the way, I know we've spoken in the past, but the thing I would also say is it's quite common to find that the teams may be slightly resistant or a little bit skeptical or cynical or whatever it is about this kind of thing. Good leadership takes them through that, because what we always find without fail is that by the end of the process, because it's a highly engaging process, they're not just happy with it, they're pulling to make the changes happen. It's not difficult at all for them. So it's not about having to push things into them. By the end of the process, because we're very unobtrusive, but also very engaging still, it makes for good purchase, if you like, on the changes. And there's never going to be a calm time. Even after this COVID crisis, it's going to be more and more and more.
It'll be something else that comes down the line.
Yeah.
Right, question. Thank you, Andy. We're now going to move on. It's a lovely segue into our next speaker, and we'll create some opportunities for the panel as we go on, I'm sure. So now I'd like to welcome Ashley Cohen, Sales and Operations Director at AAH, to introduce our next speaker. Ashley. Sorry, Ashley, you appear to be muted. Try again.
Am I on now? Great. Good evening, everybody. And it's a real pleasure to be here this evening as a sponsor of Pharmacy Business Conference 2020. And certainly have enjoyed the speakers so far. And now we're on to our final speaker for the evening, who will be talking to us about how you create the capacity and capability to develop a business plan. Please welcome Deborah Evans, Managing Director of Pharmacy Complete. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Ashley. Now, just looking to see if I can move my slide on. Lovely, great, thank you. Truly inspirational speakers this evening, and thank you to Pharmacy Business for inviting me to be part of it. And thank you, Andy, for setting my session up so beautifully and finding us that elusive thing, time. And it has been mentioned by everybody this evening. I mean, it's true to say, working in pharmacy, we're never idle unless, of course, Andy has created that spare time for us. We're not sitting around wondering what to do with our day, whiling away the hours until home time. We blink and it's closing time, and the day doesn't finish there. From the moment I sign in until the moment I leave, I'm busy, really busy, reacting to whatever comes in front of me, literally. And that's the point, reacting. Finding the time to respond rather than react to the huge, unprecedented, monumental challenges that we face is not going to be easy. But to do nothing, well, that's madness. Waiting for something or someone to save our sector and therefore your business is an incredible risk. Hoping for a positive outcome from the contract negotiations is not enough and potentially wishful thinking. I believe we all want more control over what happens to our businesses. I'm going to talk this evening about how to use your most precious commodity, your time, to be on your business rather than constantly in it. Andy's already spoken to us about how we might achieve that. Creating valuable space to stop the relentless doing and think more strategically about the direction we have to take. The pandemic has happened at a time when we're already challenged hugely by significant change with an urgent need to review our business model. We've been squeezed by financial cuts and have had to ensure our continued relevance as consumers change their expectations and behaviours against a backdrop of changing NHS priorities. In recent months, we've had to focus on core supply whilst ensuring the safety of our teams and patients. We've literally put ourselves into reverse, increasing our reliance on NHS dispensing rather than decreasing it with a reduction in service delivery, the opposite of the intended direction of travel. And of course, this pandemic is like nothing we've been through before. And when faced with exceptional events, as leaders and managers, we must take a hard look at our strategy and how we operate. The world has changed and there's no going back. What worked in the past won't necessarily work in the future. So how are we going to sustain and then grow our businesses within a different context? We don't know what the next few months will bring, but we do know that to remain as we are is not an option. Dispensing alone is not going to sustain community pharmacy. Consumers want a different experience. New competitors are emerging. Optimising services is both urgent and important, especially flu vaccination and potentially COVID-19 vaccine, NMS, community pharmacist consultation service, and the new discharge medicine service. This is what NHS wants us to do, and it builds our relationship with patients as a clinical provider in healthcare. Doing more than dispensing and fully integrating clinical services into our operations, assuming pandemic conditions, will be critical. A service-led model is important for sustainability and our future, as shared by Sanjay in a patient-centric way. You've heard from the other speakers about a number of factors directly affecting pharmacy, both this evening and on Tuesday. They are well articulated. We know from the many conversations we've had with national and local leaders in pharmacy, contractors and their teams, that the impact these factors are having is huge, particularly the feeling of being completely out of control and the personal strain that comes with this. But what do we do? It can be very tempting to spend a lot of time and energy on issues over which we have no control. For example, contract negotiations, the economy or national policies, what's happening with coronavirus. These sap our energy and can demoralize us into thinking we can't do anything. Far from empowering, far more empowering is focusing on those issues that are in our direct control, or those issues over which we have significant influence over. In other words, when looking at a problem that you have, make sure it's something that you have the power to resolve. The key when making a decision to focus on fixing something is to challenge yourself with the questions. What can I directly control? What can I influence? And what can I leave and let others fight the battle over? What do I need to accept and adapt to? One of the ways to focus on the work that you can control is to review your business strategically and develop a business plan. This isn't what we normally do. Whilst many of us own and run businesses, we've not necessarily gone through formal business training. Having the discipline and capacity to properly review the business objectively is the only real way we can make the right decisions. We believe there are seven key steps to making the changes pharmacy needs to make a reset. First of all, decide to change. This can be the biggest barrier. What is your imperative for change? What are your reasons? How can you be proactive? Look at your business objectively, using data to give you information on what's working and what is not. Go through a strategic planning process with evidence-based steps to evaluate what is critical for success, define your priorities and the key actions for change. And importantly, build your personal resilience. You will need tenacity, strength and energy, as well as leadership skills. So invest in yourself. If you don't look after yourself, you cannot look after anybody else. Number 5, execute your business plan. Make sure the things you've highlighted as critical do happen. This is essentially where success or failure takes place. Make sure that you look after have the right people in your team with the right skills and attitude, and engage with key stakeholders to build success. You don't operate in a vacuum. Engagement with other local leaders, your community, the NHS, primary care network, LPC, GPs are all essential for growth and viability. Going into this process is essential to recognise the need to change and to be absolutely committed to putting your passion, energy and time into the changes that will be required. It's not going to be easy and you will need to be determined and tenacious. And business planning can be daunting, but it can be really helpful to think about it as a simple 4-step process. Where are you now? The reality. Where do you want to be? Your aims and goals. How are you going to get there? What are the options? And then doing it, preparing for action and making it happen. The first step is to ask yourself some searching questions to truly understand where you are now. Your intuition will take you so far, but is no substitute for the hard facts. Go through a rigorous situational analysis that includes collating data on your current performance, information about your community, the markets in which you operate, and your competitors. You want to be able to articulate what is underpinning your business performance and profitability. Be able to describe your core customers as if you were in front of the dragons in the dragon's den. You need to be able to answer, for example, who are your customers? Who are the consumers of your services? Which customers are more profitable to your business? Which are most important? What makes you attractive to your customers? What makes them come back to you? And what do they say about your pharmacy and what you offer? To be able to answer these questions and questions like these, you'll need to understand a range of metrics, such as what percentage of your turnover comes from prescription supply and what is the trend? How have you performed against the market growth? What is your turnover from NHS services, private services, over-the-counter sales? What is your current profitability? How has this changed over time, and what does it need to be? What is the average transaction value by customer? How does this vary by customer type? How has this changed over time? And so on. And right now, it's really important to see how this was trending pre-COVID-19 and during the pandemic. But this sounds like an enormous amount of work, so it's got to be important. So why is it? Well, firstly, our recent performance provides an indication of how things will continue if we don't change. If you have a negative short-term growth or performance, then if you don't change anything, then you're in decline. Secondly, we can use this data to make decisions objectively and not base what we decide to do on what we think is right. Seeing in black and white declining average customer transaction value focuses the mind on what we need to do to increase it. A decreasing profitability from an almost entirely NHS business will eventually make you unviable. Remember, though, this is about what we can control, and hoping that the NHS is going to ping some more money our way is not a business strategy. Instead, find ways to reduce your reliance on NHS funding, as we've heard our speakers talk about this evening. And even if you're familiar with a SWOT analysis, and it's been around for decades, it is an important exercise to go through on an annual basis. Ideally, working with your team, it's important to understand your strengths and weaknesses as a business and then define what you see as the opportunities and threats. And this picture can move really quickly. As we know, a year ago, we didn't have COVID-19. And so an opportunity presented by the pandemic, for example, is diagnostic testing. An external threat might be the current view held by the regulator around testing within a pharmacy environment. What we want to do is leverage the opportunities using our strengths whilst neutralising any threats and the impact of our weaknesses. So turning all of your data into information allows you to define some key findings, those key statements about your business. The next step in the business planning process is to be clear about where you're going. To do this, you must be able to clearly define your purpose. What business are you in? Why are you doing what you're doing? How does it serve your community? Could you define your purpose in a sentence right now without thinking? If not, then this is really worth some time to define so that you can. So start with these questions. What do you love doing? What are you great at? What does your community, customers and health system need? And will you be paid for it? Finally, you must be clear about your key strategic goals. These are the big goals you must achieve in order to deliver against your purpose. Think ahead 3 years. Where will you be? What have you achieved? Having understood where you are now and where you want to get to, the next step is define how. We suggest you define 5 to 6 critical success factors, those things that you must do to achieve your business goals. These build on your key findings and ensure you deliver against your ambitions. In other words, if you don't deliver your critical success factors, you fail. And just a couple of examples which link into some of the things we've heard this evening. You might have a critical success factor, for example, which says we must review and improve our operational processes so that we can operate safely and more efficiently to release capacity and reduce waste in resources. Or you might say we must ensure we're using digital developments and technology to deliver a better service and experience for customers, and so on. But where to focus for growth? One way of doing this is to use an ANSOF matrix. The matrix allows you to understand where you can grow by examining your current and potential product or service offerings against your current customer base or new markets. The output is a series of suggested growth strategies which set the direction for your business strategy. So going around this grid, market penetration. This is the least risky strategy. It's about increasing what you already do with your current customers. For example, increasing the number of new medicine services that you deliver or the number of flu vaccinations. The next business strategy to look at is around product development. This is essentially introducing a new service to your current customers. For example, a private travel vaccine service. And Sunil talked about some of the ways that he's extended his capabilities to his current customers. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Market development is taking an existing service to new customers, for example, a vaccine service into occupational health. And then the most risky strategy is market diversification. It's not necessarily where you would go when you have lower fruit to pick for growth. It's where, for example, you introduce a new service to a completely new customer group. For example, and this is before Sunil put his presentation up, online video consultations to the public whom you don't currently engage with. But of course, in Sunil's case, he's already developing the capability around video consultations. So for him, that's a market development strategy. So after all this great work defining strategy and direction, it's important to have a clear action plan. What will you do and when will you do it? What resources do you need and who's going to do the work? In any business strategy involving change, it's important to have some quick wins to demonstrate that you're on the right track. This is especially important when there is an urgent imperative to change. One way to decide where to focus action is to look at the impact of any change you make versus the ease of making that change. We can map out our thinking on a grid, impact versus ease. And of course, you can see I like these grids. But when it comes to making choices about where to invest your time and resource, then the first place to start is those things that have a high impact but are easy to change. When these have been done, focus on high impact, difficult to change. And then when these are done, focus on the high impact, difficult to change. I think I got that wrong, but you get the gist. Low impact, easy to change, and then high impact, difficult to change. And don't bother with the low impact, difficult to change. They're just not going to be worth your effort for the reward that they will give you. So an example of this within our own pharmacy would be high impact, easy to change. Look at your telephone protocol and answering system. Lower impact, easy to change, perhaps moving the bags to ensure quicker packing. I know that sounds, like a little silly thing, but it made a big difference to us. High impact, more difficult to change, might be training to additional technicians to be ACTs. Oh, this has been a rapid review of an outline business planning process, and I'm hoping that there's something in here that's helped and has motivated you to find the time to be on your business rather than constantly in it. And for your personal resilience, find ways of releasing capacity and delegating so that you're working smarter, not longer and harder. One of the implicit strengths of independent pharmacy is how quickly we can respond and be nimble, but this is only a strength if exercised. And we cannot wait. We must act now to save our businesses and the independent pharmacy sector. And we have to do this without relying on others. No one else is going to do this for us. And the most important ingredient for this change, leadership. In every independent pharmacy in this country is the leader who will make this happen. To stand still is not an option. The time to do this is now. Thank you.
Forgive me. Thank you, Deborah, for that, as you say, whistle-top tour through a beginning to end of strategic business planning. We all know there's a lot of work that has to go into that, but thank you for the work you've put into that. It tops off the 4 presentations really well, because we've talked about various things like technology, video consultations, patient engagement, and efficiencies and productivity to create the time. But to have a plan that you then build on that meets the needs of the locality is absolutely key. I haven't got any specific questions come through from anybody as yet, but there was one in the questions that came through when people were registering that I particularly wanted to highlight to you, and that is, okay, if the basic framework of the contractual framework isn't enough to sustain me, where would you start?
I'd personally would go to the things that really that I'm really passionate about and have some energy, because I'm much more likely to implement them. But I would absolutely want to do some research with customers and consumers of those services, because it's all very well me having a passion about something or an interest, in implementing something, I would focus on those market penetration activities first, the services that are already in the contractual framework, in addition, to dispensing NMS, vaccinations, DMS, community pharmacy consultation service, all of that, get that to the optimum level of delivery before expanding into other things.
Okay, really helpful. And one from the side that's perhaps not quite with you, but because I know that when you're working in practice, how you engage with your community. What's your opinion of social prescribing opportunities in community pharmacy?
Yes, that's a very simple answer. I mean, it fits with, the work that we've done around healthy living pharmacy and the opportunity to take those conversations to the next level and to truly make a difference. So absolutely, it's an obvious service, community pharmacy, to get involved in.
Yeah. Okay, and there was one earlier on that related to healthy living pharmacy, as you are the mother of it. We are uniquely placed as we see healthy individuals as well as those with long-term condition. It's a USP to promote self-care and educate on staying healthy. Any thoughts in response to that comment?
Yes, and it links to something I think Sanjay said at the beginning around the importance of I'm sure, Sanjay, you said this, but it was around the fact that we're so used to seeing people in our pharmacies, and whether we're engaging with them in a different way, virtually or with masks on, it's still really important to engage with people, because the number of conversations I've had with people who look healthy and seemingly are healthy, but you just ask a question, you just listen, and something comes up that's perhaps worthy of further investigation. So, and an opportunity for us to demonstrate value, of course. And on that point, actually, when we do see people in our pharmacies, it's very easy now to get behind the barrier of the mask, the barrier of the screen, the 2 meters distance, and miss those cues, miss those opportunities. So we've got to adapt and respond to that engagement, the body language, the way we communicate in a different way to be able to achieve the same outcomes for people.
Thank you for that. That's absolutely right. And we have to find different ways of doing that. One final question for you that just popped up from an old friend, Chris Martin. If you had a magic wand, what would you wish for our profession?
What, aside from more money? Which was sadly the first thing that came to my head. What I really, really want is for the many, we see many cases of innovation, and we've seen them this evening, inspirational from Sanjay and Sunil in terms of the work that they're doing and what we heard on Tuesday from your panelists. And I would just love to see quicker adoption of what we know works across many pharmacies in the country, to have an engaged, motivated pharmacist workforce, and I'm afraid that's not true. We don't, and that's not apportioning blame anywhere, but we have a workforce that's very tired and perhaps doesn't see the possibilities in the same way as your panelists and speakers have this evening. So that's what I would wish. That's my magic wand, that pharmacists out there are hugely motivated, and there are some wonderful pharmacists around, but there's a lot that have lost their mojo, and I'd love to give them that back.
So the mojo magic wand. Thank you for that thought. I hope, Chris, you like that answer. I'll give you my magic wand maybe at the end in my summary. Deborah, thank you very much for your insights into business planning, and thank you for all you do. It's now my privilege to introduce our pharmacy leaders panel. Now it's me that can't get the slides to move on. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Simon Jukes, the Chief Executive of the Pharmaceutical Services Negotiating Committee. Simon, welcome back again, and thank you again for covering both nights in a very busy week for you. Mark Leonette, the Chief Executive of the MPA. Welcome, Mark, and thank you again for joining us. Ashley Cowan, the Sales and Operations Director at AAH, yes, you're up there now, Ashley. Thank you very much. And Julia Mount, the Managing Director of Alliance Healthcare. So it's now, I guess, the opportunity for everybody to come in with a pile of questions here. But I'm going to kick off first for each of you individually to give me one key insight into the future of community pharmacy. Maybe that's what your magic wand might be. I'm going to start off with Mark.
Yeah, it's funny, and can you hear me? Yeah. It's funny how we've all sort of prepared some thoughts and notes, and quite a lot of it is very similar to what we've heard earlier in the presentations. So my wish, Mike, would be, as Sanjay said, as Sunil said, keep looking for the opportunities, not the threats. I know how hard that is listening to members when funding is so tight at the moment, and as we've heard tonight, everyone is so crazy busy. But as I'm inspired by the speakers tonight, I'm always inspired by members who have found their way to be innovative, to find those opportunities, to put the threats to one side. You know, Sanjay, Sunil gave us examples tonight, but the one I'd prepared in my head, thinking about what you might ask us, Mike, was one of my board members, Amish Patel, who runs Hodgson's down in Kent. And Amish was telling me just last week quite how many services he's introduced in the last couple of years just to make up for that falling fencing income. You know, he's got a travel clinic, which was very opportune because previously people had to wait 6 weeks for appointments. Now it's much quicker with him. He's got a private GP service over video link. He's got private common ailments with an IP, phlebotomy, private blood testing. He's been doing aesthetics, some of you will know, for a longer time. And of course, most recently, that opportunity people have seen around earwax removal. Doesn't sound very glamorous. It's particularly in his patch, brilliant opportunity because previously.
Sorry, we're having a few issues with a feedback loop because somebody's speaker's running through into their microphone, I think. So we may just have to mute those of you who are not speaking. I'll leave it to Nicole, our technical man, to organise that. Sorry, Mark.
I was saying, so that's my example, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example, and Amish, I know, is a great innovator and a winner of the Pharmacy Business Awards on at least one occasion now. So, Simon, what's your magic wand going to give the future of the profession?
Well, I don't think I've got any silver bullets, Michael, but what I would say is, first of all, the speakers are fantastic tonight, and there's some really good insights there. And I found myself nodding and commenting on the screen. Sanjay is always very good. Sunil's, I particularly like that combination of NHS and private services that he talked about there. I think for me, it's about, there's more and more you hear about that, and Deborah touched on it as well, which is that, you know, getting on top of your business, getting on top of your finances, and really understanding them. It's so vital now as things are so tight, and are going to continue to be so. But then really looking at, and you've heard me say this before, Michael, but really looking at those free services and doing all this stuff that we do for free. Perhaps we'll come on to it later, but actually, you know, what we need to be looking at now through the COVID lens with the contractual framework going forward is making sure that we try and get due and proper reimbursement recompense for those free services.
Indeed, indeed. A good ambition. Ashley, your magic wand, your insight into the future of community pharmacy.
So I think, like many, I don't know that there's a silver bullet, but what I think is really important is for community to pharmacy to take some real strength from what we've just been through and apply it to the challenges that we've seen. I think many of us have witnessed a speed of change in operating procedures and the way that people have looked at their business and really applying themselves to a crisis and been amazed by what we can achieve. And actually, I think pharmacy have proved themselves to the government and to the communities in which they serve because they've stayed open, they've kept dispensing running when we've known the doctors have closed, and then taken on the brunt of that as well. And rather than see that as a burden, I think we've proved how amazing pharmacy is, and we should take that as some real confidence and some strength into the future of the undoubted challenges that we face. And by the way, you've got people like us as healthcare distributors being big supporters on the sidelines, encouraging as well, because we see so much tremendous opportunities and strength in community pharmacy.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, and I'll come back to that support element in terms of making things happen and can be supporting to get that happen in a short while. Julian, your insights into the future?
Yeah, indeed. Well, following on a theme, I think pharmacy can walk tall. I think it can be very proud of what it's achieved. And, you know, Alliance Healthcare standing shoulder to shoulder, I don't think people really understood how their medicines, especially politicians, got into pharmacy hands. And I think what we've demonstrated, you know, 1 in every 3 packs of NHS medicine is supplied by Alliance Healthcare. And I think standing shoulder to shoulder with community pharmacy has actually showed the government and the payers the strength of the network that it has. So I think pharmacy can really walk tall and walk proud. And I think actually, if there was one thing that I would say is, it's actually to grasp the nettle now, seize the opportunity, because the time is right. When you look at the innovation, not only the innovation that's being driven by pharmacists, but you think of the technology that's available in terms of the efficiencies that it can drive, the time saving, the additional platforms that can be used in terms of patient interaction. I think that you're at a bit of an epoch in terms of the timing is right for pharmacy, the technology is right for pharmacy. All we've got to do is walk tall together and unlock the paying element and get that recognition. So my glass is very much half full, not half empty.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure that's the case for all of you, but with a realism lens as well. When all of your customers, your constituents, your contractors, your members are running hard and going backwards in some sense, certainly financially. Interesting comment from an old friend of pharmacy, Trevor Gore. He won't mind me calling him an old friend because he's just hit the big 6-0. Please stop referring to free services. They're not free, they're just unpaid for. There's a difference. So it's a very appetite point. I'll come back to another question in a minute, but one's just popped in. Do the panel, and this is for you to start with, Simon, does the panel think there should be a sensible colour pharmacy numbers by compensating some to close in order that the remainder can be sustainable? Simon.
Well, first of all, this has to be, if that is to be the case, then it has to be something that's decided by the sector, and if you like, for the sector and between the sector. But I think that what we've seen, but my answer is actually, I don't think, you know, there should be. I think that we have 11,400 now pharmacies. We had 11,500 this time this last year, and we need every single one of them. I think what we've seen is a network of community pharmacies over the pandemic period shows how vital that network is, and the amazing work that we've done, which has already been touched on. I won't repeat, but the provision of obviously dispensing medicines, absolutely vital. The provision of the services, whether they are unfunded or funded, and I take that point, you know, has just shown how vital this is. And I think that, just to touch on my point that I made in the last answer, which is that the COVID has changed things, and it's changed the contractual framework. It wasn't written with COVID in mind. Patient behaviour has changed. Their relationship with the community pharmacy has changed. The relationship with GPs have changed, and I think that we need to now reflect that. So actually, no, I don't think there should be a cull, whether organised or unorganised, of community pharmacy. I think there should be investment in community pharmacy. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be doing this job. And I think that we've got a really strong evidence base to put forward to government, which indeed we have done, and we're pushing hard for that. It'll be interesting to see how, following the Chancellor's spending review, where the money is divvied up within the Department of Health and NHS England. I strongly feel that you know, one of the pots that money should be put in is community pharmacy, because it's not only proved itself, but it's also demonstrated the potential, many of your speakers did that tonight as well, what we can provide in the future as well.
Indeed. So it's about how you use the estate rather than trimming the estate.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mark, have you got a comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose I have to understand the question, but I think the short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is why would any health service with a shortage of clinicians, and having seen what the sector has done over the last 8-9 months, why would anybody want to reduce the number of pharmacies? And I think that I'm speaking not just for England there. I think, you know, that's true across the UK. That, you know, one of the big values that the customer is beginning to attach to us is that clinical potential that's untapped. Why would you want to close pharmacies and deprive yourself of that? I just can't see it.
No, I concur. But we do have to get that funding model right to support the estate that we've got, and we can discuss that until the cows come home, can't we?
Yeah.
So one question, and I'm going to give this to Julian and Ashley. It came up on Tuesday night as well, but the Amazon pharmacy entry or potential entry, and certainly in the States, Julian, your parent company had a big impact on the shareholding of the parent company when that was announced in the States last week. What immediate issues should we be looking to as possible threats? So Julian, you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I do. And again, it's something we've been discussing as a group for the last couple of years, as it's, you know, primarily went in the US and now rumours here. But I think what you'll see is that, you know, throwing medicines over your fence in the garden is different from Amazon packages. So I think the whole concept of the health hub for community pharmacy, people want to have that face-to-face interaction when something's wrong. So again, you can see the way that interactions with virtual consultations have changed with GPs, etc. There will be a place undoubtedly for online and internet pharmacy, but I really don't think it can replace what goes on with a pharmacy interaction in bricks and mortar, with the services, expertise, clinical experience. When people are worried about their health, they want to see somebody. And I think that the COVID period has really demonstrated that pharmacy is the go-to health hub for the community. So I think the answer to that is, if it's a commodity-based, efficient, sort of cheap as chips, mail order, basic service, then Amazon may be interested in it. So I think the differentiation that bricks and mortar pharmacy, community pharmacy can build to differentiate itself into not a like-for-like comparison offer, but a real enhanced value-added experience of why to visit the community pharmacy, then to me, I think, yes, it's a threat, but is it going to come in and put us all out of business? I don't think so.
Okay, Ashley, do you have a view on that? I mean, you've got Echo, which has grown 2,000% in this last year.
Yes, well, I get asked a lot about Amazon, having worked for Amazon for 5 years as an ex-Amazonian. It's often a question that comes my way, and I've got two parts to the answer. The first is Amazon's already here. Okay, so they are already in the space, and products that we see offered OTC, and we have to be very acutely aware that they are having an impact in the high street. So it's not are they coming? They are already very much a live threat. The second part of this is Amazon is only 1% of the total retail market, and they're in this to look at soft opportunities to grow. And they will find places where they can drive selection and customer experience and ease of doing business. And that's the opportunities that they'll go and find. And I use the parallel of what they've done with a brand called Amazon Fresh. Amazon Fresh was an online food opportunity that they saw in North America, and it grew tremendously quickly. I mean, it was an explosive opportunity for Amazon in the States. Amazon Fresh exists here in the UK, and I would imagine very few people in the audience here tonight even know of it. And the reason we don't know of it is because online food shopping through the supermarkets that we've got today is fantastic. And Amazon can't penetrate the UK in the way they did in North America because the market is really well served for selection and convenience and ease of doing business. And I think if pharmacy can be in that space where they're doing the right things for their patients and their customers in a focused and easy to do business way in the high street, particularly where we know people are focused on local and have that genuine face-to-face caring customer service that we've spoken about a little bit tonight, then there'll be no room for Amazon. Amazon will not get in. And that's one of the things I think we really have to focus on. And there are plenty of tools and plenty of opportunities to do that. But I think the time is right now to do that.
Thank you, Ashley. And that differentiation of community pharmacy is the key. So if we are transactional, then it's comparable. But if we're a healthcare service which happens to supply medicines, then that differentiation exists. Mark, have you got a view, comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, just a couple of observations, I suppose. I think Ashley's right. We can't always assume because a particular service worked in the States or is about to work in the States, it will work here. And I mean, one of the things I'm acutely aware from my colleagues in the States is the cost of medicine supply is many, many times higher than it is here in the UK. And so I suspect the promises that Amazon and PillPack are currently making are much easier to deliver in the States because you can cut cost out of that supply chain in a way that's probably much, much harder to do in the UK. I think with my latest information is that with the possible exception of New Zealand, we are the cheapest medicine supply country in the world. So I think Ashley's right that we can't just sort of extrapolate from what's happening in the States. One other thing though, that by way of a bit of a warning, we did a public survey last June at the height of the pandemic, really just to understand how the public across the UK saw all of what pharmacy had been doing. And it was so pleased we did it because it turned out we were the only people, I think, who did it at scale. We had a couple of thousand people across all 4 countries. And there was a slightly paradoxical view of the public around a couple of things that are relevant here. On one hand, they were far, far more likely and comfortable with medicines being delivered through the post than when we asked the same question 4 years ago. Can't quite remember all the numbers off the top of my head at 9 o'clock, but much more likely than they were when we asked the same question 4 years ago. But, and Julian said this earlier, their absolute sure desire to have that face-to-face interaction with the pharmacist for the advice. Now, the challenge, of course, is that we know that one depends upon the other. You know, supply through the pharmacy is what enables the face-to-face advice. Of course, the public doesn't understand that. And so, you know, the public doesn't see that their two desires are potentially contradictory there. So there's definitely things we need to work through. But I think, you know, especially after the last 6 or 7 months, you'd have to back the resilience and the quality of the sector in terms of being able to take on the challenge.
Thank you for that. I was talking to your equivalent in the States just a couple of days ago, Doug, who you know, Mark, don't you? And, yeah, Doug Hoey. And he was obviously, you know, looking at the impact it could have, particularly with the way that the pricing structures and the pharmacy business managers and operate in the States. And the likelihood, well, what had happened in the States was it grew quite dramatically, mail order pharmacy, and then it dropped off because they had all sorts of issues with non-supply, temperature control, and the likes, and ended up with big piles of non-delivered return meds and a dissatisfied patient. And you know, we've seen, yes, in the last 6 months, 9 months during the pandemic, online pharmacy grow quite dramatically, but we're still only at 3.4% of the market the last time I looked. So you know, we should be focused on these. You know, we can't control what Amazon decide to do or Pharmacy2U decide to do. What we are in control of is what we do as individual pharmacies and the way we run our business with the people we have and the estate that we have. So that goes back to the point that Deborah was making around what's in your sphere of control and influence as opposed to not. Just want to look at a couple of other questions that have come in from the floor, so to speak, around diagnostic services. So with GPs struggling to see a lot of people for all sorts of reasons, partly because people don't want to go to places where other people are ill. Would there be a sensible move of more of the diagnostics, particularly the monitoring of patients, into pharmacies? Simon, do you want to comment on that one?
I mean, I think, I mean, the answer is yes, of course. There are plenty of services, and many have been touched on during the course of this evening, that community pharmacy can get involved in and succeed at. My view is always, you know, when you look at the community pharmacy contractual framework, as you were talking, I jotted down a few, you know, a few services that we still have yet to deliver in that contractual framework. And you know, as already has been mentioned this evening, we've got the discharge medicine service next year. We've got more HLP provisions. We've still got that NHS travel vaccination issue that hasn't yet, of course, been rolled out properly. We've got CPCS referrals from urgent treatment centres. We've got stop smoking referrals from hospitals, palliative care service, point of care testing, AMRs, you know, stewardship, hypertension, case finding, and so on and so on. And that's not even counting the extension of the NMS. That's not even counting the work that inevitably community pharmacy wants to get involved in the complementary primary care network DES stuff, whether that's early cancer diagnosis or dealing with health inequalities. And that's not even dealing with what Keith Ridge said at the LPC conference a few months ago about independent prescribing pathways for community pharmacy. There is so much. So my question back is, yes, of course, community pharmacy has the clinical outlook and skill set to do all of these things, but it comes down to capacity, and the contractual framework was written, embedded in it was capacity through efficiencies in dispensing. those efficiencies have not materialized. And so while I know there are, clearly Andy has talked passionately about freeing up capacity within community pharmacy, and no doubt there is always something people can do to find more capacity. But ultimately, this is more than that. That we need additional funding going forward in order to carry out and to deliver those services within the contractual framework. And added to that is the thing that I won't repeat, but I've said already, which is that patient behavior has changed. And so which is really coming back to your question again, and that the point being that these services, which I do not want to see being done by stealth for free, unfunded, and therefore not valued, because that just makes our whole position, less and less tenable and less sustainable.
So questions I'll come back to you, Simon, for this question as well, because it's obviously key to your role. But Mark, I just want to ask you a question now, which is, do you think that the officials at Department of Health and Social Care and NHS England, that people like Simon sit opposite, do you think the attitudes have truly changed to reflect what pharmacy has stood up and be proud of during the pandemic?
A good question. A good question, and it's one that you'd like to feel very confident of, because of all the things everybody said about actually what an amazing, resilient and innovative sector we've had, that's kept the doors open, kept serving people with service that actually previously perhaps they were going to the GP for. So added all that pharmacy audit that Simon's organisation did that proved all of that. I like to think the answer is yes, actually, Mike. If I had to come down, I think the answer is probably different in each of the 4 countries in terms of the extent to which NHS officials and government in each country recognise the value of the sector. There was a period, there was one moment, wasn't there, in May or something, where you had Nicola Sturgeon tweeting with one of our members in Scotland, bantering about how brilliant she thought the sector was, live on Twitter. That was quite a moment. Took a little longer in UK government to get the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State to kind of open up and acknowledge the sector, and I think that was well received eventually by members. I think we've had more positive conversations, if I'm honest. So, how would we judge whether their attitude has changed? Since with NHS England, we've had some very interesting positive conversations around change and what they're looking for in a very positive way. The challenge, of course, is always, as Simon's pointed out, capacity, and are you willing to pay for the things that you say are so important to you? And so you have to, you have to judge it both ways, but definitely some very constructive conversations, and not a view that not a widely held view that wouldn't we all have been so much better if we had 4 big sheds on the M1, which was a view that was held by 1 or 2 folks at different points in the first 3 or 4 months. So yeah, as Julian said, we've got to be glass half full, otherwise we don't seize the opportunities and just drown in the threats.
And Simon, how confident do you feel about that recognition converting into a bigger global sum?
Well, that's what I said on Tuesday night, that will be the test, won't it? That, we've had some really positive words from ministers, from Joe Churchill, from the Secretary of State. Credit to the MPA and some great work that they've done in getting stories out there and getting media involved and interested in community pharmacy, and highlighting and showcasing a lot of the great work that has been done on the front line. That needs, all those warm words need to be converted into outcome, and that's what we'll see over the next few weeks, one way or the other. yes, I think our case is very strong. And I've said that, and I was optimistic when we put it in. I'm still optimistic, but I do understand that there are other pressures on the economy. But if you were going to put your money and invest in a part of healthcare, then you'd put it in a community pharmacy, given everything that we've talked about tonight and the potential. That's the point, and I think that's where Julian's coming from. The potential for community pharmacies to do so much more. NHS on the high street, the accessibility, all those things that we know about. If you were putting money in, you would put it into pharmacy.
No, absolutely. Julian, you reflected earlier on about the government having a better recognition of the role of the wholesaler or the supply chain as a whole. Any other reflections on that quickly?
Yes, indeed, Mike. I mean, it was suffice to say that I do believe until a year ago, government didn't realise that we delivered to 20,000 dispensing points twice a day. And so the network, not only it's an integrated network with community pharmacy, it can't be separated. It's an integrated network, and it is the backbone of the NHS. So whenever I talk now, and we're talking about other matters with regard to vaccine distribution, etc., right now, and we're actually saying that, you know, you don't know the diamond that you've actually got, because how community pharmacy and the distribution sector has stood up through this and will stand up in the coming year with vaccines, that is something that if you hadn't had that capability and capacity, you would be in a real mess. So I think they are aware of that now, and definitely with the discussions that I'm having, it is, I think a few eyes have been opened for the positive.
And Ashley, thank you, Julian. And Ashley, would you reflect that?
Yeah, I think it's, as Julian said, we worked together way back a year ago trying to get people to pay attention to how the drugs circulated through the sector. But the very fact that this was a healthcare emergency put the spotlight on us. And as from the moment we started realizing that the Nightingale hospitals would be open, we were able, as AAH, to be able to start supplying those hospitals within the 24 hours of that announcement. And that's really opened the door to the distributors being invited in and asked for their thoughts and contribution about how can we fix this emergency, and then onwards, as Julian said, through what may well be coming next. And we've not really had those sorts of levels of conversations before. And so for myself and Toby Anderson, our CEO, are more conversations with number 10 on where this really could go and what we can do to be really an obvious part of the solution. And that's a very encouraging thing from my perspective.
Yeah, there's one point just put in as a comment on the question box. Maybe it's number 11 we need to be talking to, and number 10 sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just ask each of you one more question about what's getting in the way of all of this ambition, if I can put it that way, happening, and what could enable it. So I'm going to go back to Julian first and ask that question. And can I also ask you just to comment on how you see your role or your organisation's role in making it happen?
Yes, certainly, Mike, and it's a great way to end. For me, this is all about business transformation. I've run businesses across the world, and there's one thing that's absolutely key. When you need to evolve and change your business model, there's no easy way of doing it, but you have to do it. And I think that where we are now is pharmacy is a great opportunity now, as I said before, with regard to the technology, the appetite, the customer, the perception. And I really think that kind of diversification away from just dispensing income into the healthcare hub of the future, utilizing that technology, it isn't going to be an easy road to do that. But, you know, I'd just like to say that Alliance Healthcare stands absolutely behind that change. You know, part of what we're trying to do is roll out enhanced digital capabilities at pharmacy. We have 19,000 users now on the MyAH portal every day to free up time in the pharmacy, whether it's the Alphega program that we have. For me, it's helping our partners, which are community pharmacy, transform and evolve into the pharmacy of the future. And I think now is the time to get on that bus and to start that journey.
Thank you, Julian. Ashley?
I think there's a barrier that we'd have to recognise that could be easily fixed, and that's making sure that we're all speaking with one voice on the things that really matter for us. Because I think there are disparate views, I think, and different bodies that may well be a little divisive, perhaps. So it could be bold as saying, if we were able to bring the kind of things that we've heard tonight into one voice, it would be a really important step for us to make and overcome that barrier. And I think from an AAH point of view, being part of McKesson as a big business, a lot of heft, is reach out to your biggest supporters. AAH will support through these sorts of changes and able to represent the kind of desires we want to have for a new community pharmacy.
Thank you, Ashley. And Mark, your view as you know, the organisation that's representing and supporting independent pharmacy. What do you think the barriers are and some of those solutions that the MPA will be putting in place?
I think the barriers are probably lots of different things in different ways, and I'm probably not, given the time, I'm probably not going to focus too much on the barriers. I think let's try and focus on what we need to do to overcome them. I would say we've got an opportunity now in the next 18 months, 2 years, and that I'm talking particularly about the English agenda here, to create leverage. We need to actually provide something and be seen to provide something that's highly valued, that cannot easily be substituted and can't be lived without. And that probably means drawing as much on the specialist skills of pharmacists in terms of medicines expertise as much as kind of doing things that other healthcare professionals can do. The more clinical we become, the more integrated we become in the wider health system, the better. That creates more leverage. And we can all play our part in that. I think the folks around the table here today and all the audience. But also we need to advocate better. We need to get better at documenting the challenges we face, perhaps, as Ashley said, speaking with one voice on the key things as well. And actually also one thing that we do very badly in the sector is we don't demonstrate the value that we provide from our perspective. Too many of the services we allow the customer to be the only voice that counts the numbers, the only voice that identifies the value and documents it. We've got to do much better than that. I mentioned the PSNC audit in the summer because I think that was a fantastic example of that. But the sector needs to take a bit more ownership of demonstrating our value, I think, and hopefully we can then take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us.
Thank you, Mark. Some very wise words in there. And Simon, finally, your opportunity. We discussed the right review and the ambitions of that and recommendations in that a little on Tuesday night, but you might want to reflect a little more on that, or you may have another view of the way forward other than negotiating the global sum.
Well, I mean, there are so many out there. I mean, I take Ashley's point, and I think that the right review and the future of that will, I hope, lead us into a better direction in ensuring that we're encapsulating the voice of community pharmacy and using it in the most effective way with their representatives and supporting them in the most appropriate way as well. Of course, the money is central to, from a PSNC perspective. I'm not going to repeat what I've said there. We've got not just the uplift to the contractual framework sum, but we've also, of course, got COVID costs. We've got £370 million that's been advanced to us that we still are waiting for a decision on. And those things are going to be priorities for us because they will allow contractors to have some financial certainty going forward. But I think it's also about, you said what about the barriers, it's about, and the other things that we're pushing for as well. the freedom for community pharmacy to be allowed to focus on patient-facing services, to get rid of some of the bureaucracy, to ensure that they have time for training, for development, for closed door working. All of these things are, I believe, essential for us to go forward as a sector. And absolutely building on Mark's point as well, which is, the data, more and more we get from the Department of Health, from NHSEI. Well, where's your evidence for this? Where's your data for this? And I think it's collecting and ensuring that we have that data across the sector to be able to say, look, here it is. Here's your proof that investing in us saves the NHS billions. Just look at DMS. It's going to start next year. We know, don't we? We know that discharge medicine service conducted by community pharmacy is going to save the NHS a hell of a lot of money. Well, we need to demonstrate that better and get the benefit from it.
Thank you, Simon. Very good points. I just want to say thank you, huge thank you to Julian, Mark, Simon and Ashley for giving up their time this evening. It's great to have such a senior representation at an event like this where people can see and hear everything you're saying. And thank you again. And I'm just now going to, it gives me the responsibility to sum up and move forward. I suppose some of the key things that came out of there were around unity, around valuing ourselves and therefore being valued by others, but also around creating a stable base that we can build our business on going forward and not just being dependent on the NHS. This one slide brings it together for me. We must focus on whatever the NHS and our patients want to buy from us or receive from their pharmacy of choice, whilst operating efficiently and cost effectively. In doing that releases the time, but also the capacity and the capability to do so. We must effectively deliver excellent customer experience in all of that. Only by optimizing our NHS services, and not everybody has that at the moment, and by growing our OTC business back, leveraging the PMEDs, leveraging our self-care agenda on the back of community pharmacist consultation service and walk-ins, and the video consultation aspects that Sunil referred to earlier today. But also building a portfolio of private services, which creates a sustainable base, profitable base, which is an ugly word to the NHS sometimes, but that's the salary that they all get, that pharmacy has to live off. So this requires a good plan. It requires effective implementation and delivery. It will require leadership at every level, undoubtedly. For me, two things are certain, and this was said earlier on this evening: doing nothing is not an option. No one will do it for you. We will be helped by these organizations we've just heard from, but we've actually got to do it ourselves. And as Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It's the ones that are most responsive to change. Now I want to run our final poll of the evening, a repeat of this, the earlier one, and this will appear on your screen for about 30 seconds for you to answer before closing and reviewing. So please indicate now how confident you feel about the future of your community pharmacy, having heard all you've done. Okay, can we close the poll off now and then show the results, please? And that's shown a significant rise in high confidence. We had 8% before this evening started, and we're now showing 40%. Yes, we had 57% showing moderate confidence, but a lot of you have shifted up to the high confidence. And we've now only got 21% in the not or slight confidence pack, whereas before we had 34%. So that's really, really a positive mood, because if we have the confidence, as I said earlier on when reflecting on one of Rena's comments, we have a chance to move forward, because you then want to invest, put the energy in, get your mojo back, as was described earlier on. If there's one magic wand that I had, it would be around unity where it matters, and having that voice, and that was articulated very well by the panel just now. I now want to say a big thanks to our sponsors. Sorry, we're not moving. Nicole, can you move me forward, please? To our sponsors, Bristol Laboratories, Glenmark and Sigma for their support in making this happen tonight. I also want to thank you, the audience, the delegates, without which it would be a waste of time. And I want to thank our panelists and all the team at Pharmacy Business who have made this happen, working very hard behind the scenes, late into the night, I know. Reminder that the Pharmacy Business Awards will be held, albeit virtually, on the 21st of January with Matt Hancock, and he will be there. He wanted to be here with us on Tuesday, but COVID and task force got in the way. But he will be there in January, we are assured. And then finally, I just want to say thank you for attending. We hope you've really benefited from the 2 sessions if you've managed to make both. These will be available on record on the Pharmacy Business website in due course. I'm not quite sure when, but please now go away and put into action what you've heard, because to delay further is to lose time and opportunity. There's never a good time, as was described earlier on, but now is the time.